What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. I've done a video about this before, but I felt like I wanted to do it again for a reason. This video is going to be about Pelican Bay. The shoe is no longer the shoe anymore. And for a long time, for decades, Pelican Bay shoe was the MIT, the Harvard, the Oxford, the Princeton of criminology. When you went to Pelican Bay shoe, it was a badge of honor. In that world, not out here, in that world, it was a badge of honor. You didn't go to Pelican Bay for nothing. The shoe, at least. You went to Pelican Bay shoe because you were a problem. That prison is notorious because of the shoe. And those men sat in that shoe, a lot of them, for decades, without ever being out there on the main yard, A or B yard. A and B, that's the main line. C and D facilities, those are the shoes. That is the shoe. Pulling up to Pelican Bay shoe. Unfortunately, I was an idiot, and I was in Pelican Bay shoe 4 separate occasions. When you pulled up to the bus, first time I got there was different. A lot different than the last time. First time I got there, when you pulled up, they would announce that there's somebody on this bus that you want to sell up with. When I call your name, that person stands up with you. And so if there was an issue, if people had a problem, they knew we wind up on the same bus to the Bay together, we can definitely sell up. Now, you couldn't just put hands on each other. You had to get it cleared. But at least the first step was already done. So, the bus pulls in, and there'd be a line of correctional officers. They call your name. You stand up. You approach the officer. You state your CDC number, your last name, and they'll tell you step out. You'd step out, and 2 officers would grab you, escort you, not grab you. They'd escort you into the corridor. They're going to take your picture against the wall right there. They're going to put you in the law library or visiting till you're housed. But when you entered Pelican Bay shoe, it was different. It was extremely quiet. There were no windows, just a long corridor, white walls. There's a brown grate above you where officers can walk to get into the towers, and if necessary, escort somebody with a gun. That's usually only certain type of people that will get treated that way for certain reasons. You'd sit in that visiting room, little cell, or that law library little cell, like I said, and you'd wait to get housed. It used to be everybody went to C1. That was like the orientation for the shoe. You get seen by committee within 10 days, and then they'd send you out to another building later. They just house you wherever. When it's time for you to be housed, again, 2 officers come. You cuff up. They open the door, and they escort you down the hallway. Like I said, white walls, no windows. It feels like you're underground. When you get in front of the door of whatever unit you're going to be housed in, the door will open up. You step in. There's going to be a cell. It's an office on one side for the counselor for that unit, and then a cell for the other on the other side of that, directly across from it. That's where you'd sit when maybe they're searching your cell, whatever, or you're going to be talking to the counselor. You're going to sit in that cell. You step in a little bit further, and there's the guard tower, the gunner in the middle. And it's almost like a hexagon. And you have the different doorways. They're going to tell you which pod you're going to head towards, and you head towards that pod. You stand in front of the door, and the door is perforated. It's like a cheese grater. You look into the pod, and you can see the shadows, the outlines of the men in those cells looking down to see who's coming. The door opens up. Normally, when you're first getting there, the cops are going to escort you to your cell. Sometimes they have you step in, the door closes behind you, handcuff port opens. In either instance, and this is how the Bay in this thing was different. If they open up the tray slot in either place, you place both of your hands outside. You're handcuffed, so obviously you stick both hands out. If they uncuff your right hand or your left hand, whichever one they start with, do not pull that hand inside the pod. They'll break your arm, the other arm, or your wrist. You will get snatched by your handcuffs. So what you do is when you're uncuffed, let's say it's your right hand, you grab, when they uncuff that hand, you grab the tray slot. They'll uncuff the other hand, you pull both hands in, they close it, you go to your cell. On your way to the cell, that's if they do it at the front door, pod door. On your way to the cell, you're looking in the cells, not to be nosy, but to look for your people. If you're a Southerner, you see that first cell, they're going to ask you, hey, homie, hey, Spencer, what's your name? And you're going to tell them your name and where you're from. If it's a Northerner, he's going to tell you, oh, your homies are in this cell over here, whatever cell. If it's a homie, he's going to say, all right, Holmes, I'm so-and-so. And then you ask him, which legends are there? Because you have to make your presence known. Now, some units, some buildings, when you get there, you're allowed to call out to at least one of the legends. Hey, this is so-and-so. I'm in E-pod, cell, whatever. Or I'm in deep, whatever pod, and whatever cell. They're going to say, all right. Other ones, the legends don't want you yelling out because that could be used as a validation point against you. So when you go out to the yard, which is basically as big as 2 of the cells, you step out there, you knock on the door or the wall, whatever it is. You find out what homie's out there with you, if it's a homie. If not, then we'll just fish it. But you have to let your presence be known. Again, it is probably the quietest place you would ever do time. At times, the silence is so it's so intense that your ears are ringing. I remember the first time I went to Pelican Bay Shoe, I went to C4. And I believe I was in D-pod. And I could sit on my cell, on my bunk, on my bunk. And I could hear the electricity going through the wires in the pod. Not in my cell, in the pod. Everything you see is white. White walls. Stairs are white. Inside your cell is white. And it's all concrete, painted white. They used to boil all the food. They would single cell you if they could. Pelican Bay Shoe was built after a prison in the United Kingdom that was built to break members of the Irish Republican Army. Pelican Bay, like I said, it was quiet. Your sense of hearing is taken away or lessened. They tried to make sure you didn't have a cellie, so you didn't have that sense of touch. You can't shake somebody's hand. They'd boil the food to take away your sense of taste. They were trying to make people go insane. And unfortunately, I saw a lot of people go that route. What I noticed with people before they went insane was they became a clean freak. When the cops would come and pick up the trays, after they passed out, breakfast and lunch, and when they would leave, and let's say there was a wrapper that fell on the tier from somebody's trash. Maybe it was the wrapper of a graham cracker. And a guy that was losing his mind would have to fish that in because it was something different. Convicts study patterns, especially in Pelican Bay Shoe. When someone would do something that was out of the pattern, everybody's antennas went up. Ladies, family members of those who have been in Pelican Bay Shoe or have done a lot of incarceration time, if they get out, don't be upset. But they're going to learn your pattern, especially if you're their wife or their girlfriend. Anybody they interact with, they're going to notice your pattern. And when the pattern changes, they're going to think the worst. It's my belief that anyone who has done time in the Pelican Bay Shoe, they have PTSD. There's a literal diagnosis called the shoe syndrome, because of people's shoe terms. And unfortunately, there are some guys that come out, and because of the length of their incarceration, especially if there was confinement time, they get disability. I'm glad Pelican Bay is shut down. There were men that did decades there. Not for committing a crime, not for breaking a rule, but because other people, mainly the administration, believed they belonged there. And there were some inmates along the way that helped the administration. To me, it was inhumane. To me, it was very irresponsible of the state, because they knew crime and criminality was being perfected inside of Pelican Bay Shoe. And a lot of guys were going in there, doing their shoe term, and probably some of them, before their shoe term was up, they paroled. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they did their shoe term and went to another prison. But everything that they learned in Pelican Bay, when they were released into society, they were an apex criminal. They were alpha. And things happened. I think, again, it's a great thing that it's shut down. And hopefully, like with the California Youth Authority, the lesson was learned, and the state never houses people like that again. There are people who commit horrible crimes, and they deserve whatever time they got coming. But when you have men who committed acts as gang members, gangbangers, as gangsters, when they were teenagers or early adulthood, believe me, by the time they're 40, 50, they're not the same person. But because of the situation, they can't let nobody know that. That's my video for the day. Hopefully you guys liked it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, man. I'm out of here.